Gopi Jana Palapa Girivaradari Yasodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Panachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Panachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yasodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Panachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Kishore Kishori ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Maharani ki jai, Gonitai ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So this morning we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 73, Text 30. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So text 30. Jagadu Prakritpyaste Mahapurusha Chestitam Yatana Vasasad Bhagavams Tata Chakrurat Atandritaha Jagadu Prakriti Mahapurusha Chesitam Yatana Vashasad Bhagavams Tata Chakruratandritaha Jagatu Prakritpyaste Mahapurusha Chestitam Yatana Vashasad Bhagavams Tata Chakruratandritaha. Please chant. Jagadu Pakrityaste Mahapurusha Chestitam Yatavanasazat Bhagavams Tata Chakruratandritaha. Adu Prakriti Bhyaste Mahapurusha Chestitam Yatavanavasasat Bhagavams Tata Chakruratandritaha. Jagatu Prakriti Bhyaste Mahapurusha Chestitam Yatana Vashasad Bhagavams Tata Chakruratandritaha. Jagatu Prakriti Bhyaste Mahapurusha Chestitam Yatana Vashasad Bhagavams Tachakruratantritaha. Thank you very much. Say the word for word. Jagadu, told. Prakritpya, to their ministers and other associates. Te, they, the kings. Mahapurusha, of the Supreme Person. Chestitam, the activities. Yata, as. Anvashasat, he instructed. Bhagavan, the Lord. Tata, so. Chakru, they did. Atandritaha, without becoming lax. And the translation by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada for this text 30 is as follows. The kings told their ministers and other associates what the personality of Godhead had done, and then they diligently carried out the orders he had imparted to them. So there's no purport for this verse. So I'll just proceed with the invocation prayers. Om Gyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shlakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swam Rupa Kadamayam Dati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavam Shah Shri Rupam Sakrajatam Sahagana Ragutam Vitam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bando Jagat Pate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapsa Kanchana Gorangi Radha Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpa Taribhyascha Kripa Sindhibhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnebhyo Namo Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Shrimati Ramapada Swami Iti Namine Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Sunyavadi Pashatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakti Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So this particular text, I'll just read it once again. The kings told their ministers and other associates what the personality of Godhead had done, and then they diligently carried out the orders he had imparted to them. So in some sense, this is a kind of summary text. So I'll go through it in that manner. So there were instructions given by Lord Krishna to these kings. And the first instruction that was given was the following. So these were Krishna's words to the king or kings. Understanding that this material body and everything connected with it has a beginning and an end, worship me by Vedic sacrifices and with clear intelligence protect your subjects in accordance with the principles of religion. So that was earlier on in the 21st chapter, that particular instruction of Lord Krishna to the kings. So Srila Sanatana Goswami, he explains that Lord Krishna is in fact teaching the method of remembrance of him, Lord Krishna. So there's a key that brings Lord Krishna to mind, and that key that allows for Lord Krishna to be brought to mind is that anything material has a starting point, growth, maintenance, expansion, deterioration, and finally disappearance. So I'm using words from Srila Prabhupada. And so this particular thought one has to actually have in mind all the time. And Srila Prabhupada expands on this particular phenomenon of anything that's material. And he puts it this way: all material bodies are subject to these 6 conditions. And any relative acquisitions accumulated by the body are definitely subject to final destruction. So, and I'm using this explanation by Srila Prabhupada. It's from his writing in Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, on this section. So by speaking about the anticipated future of the body, so looking at this, what's the future of the material body? Lord Krishna is allowing for the kings to reflect upon the connection to the activities that they're going to be performing in their particular roles. And in fact, he even spells out what must be done in the near future in order to realize their particular vision of remembering him, because that was the vision the kings had. So this was the vision of the kings, and they had this vision for their future. And they even verbalized this to Krishna at the time of their release from imprisonment by Lord Krishna from Jarasandha. So this is what they told Lord Krishna: please tell us how we may constantly remember your lotus feet, though we continue in the cycle of birth and death in this world. So they had some future for how they perceived their particular vision to be. And these kings, they received this response from Lord Krishna. And Lord Krishna, again, is giving that method whereby they can protect their bhakti, because that's what they're expressing. They're expressing devotion. In the future, how can we constantly remember your lotus feet? So Lord Krishna is giving the method whereby they can protect their bhakti. And Srila Sanatana Goswami spells it out. And this is Srila Sanatana Goswami verbalizing Krishna's thought. So this is as though Krishna is thinking this and expressing it to the kings. Accept a kingdom to spread my bhakti while practicing household dharma. So Lord Krishna is actually spelling out that future, that vision for the future for the kings, taking into account what they had as their particular desire, which was to constantly remember Lord Krishna's lotus feet. So here's the practical method. First is remembering that the body itself, the material body, is actually going to go through these successive 6 changes leading to final destruction. And at the same time, the practical method part for maintaining their bhakti was to accept a kingdom to spread bhakti while practicing their household dharma, meaning their occupational duties. So this particular method outlined by Lord Krishna to the kings of being able to realize their vision for the future is very similar to something he spells out in Bhagavad Gita. So in 1846, and of course the whole conversation in Bhagavad Gita is with a king, it's Arjuna. So this is what Lord Krishna also says in Bhagavad Gita, and you can see the overlap for that vision for the future for these kings. By worship of the Lord, who is the source of all beings and who is all-pervading, a man can attain perfection through performing his own work. So that's the particular statement of Lord Krishna. And you can see how it's very much aligned with how he's putting forward this vision for the kings. So on a very personal level, everyone has to think that he's been engaged in a particular type of occupation by Lord Krishna, H.G.Krsnarcana, the master of the senses. Every single person has to think in that way. And by the result of one's work, in which one is engaged, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, should be worshipped. So that's actually a kind of understanding that everyone has to carry. And it's very much inbuilt in this vision that Krishna is laying out for the kings. So for the kings, Lord Krishna says, or rather, he lays out the type of work. And the type of work that he's laying out for the kings is spreading bhakti while performing their work of ruling a kingdom. So they have that particular duty that's been entrusted to them, that work that's been entrusted to them. So not only are they having to rule a kingdom, but they also will be spreading bhakti or devotional service. And the question of how devotional service by the kings while ruling their kingdoms will be spread is this future vision that's outlined by Lord Krishna. How is it going to become a reality? So that's an important question that's there. And we can look at this question from a particular perspective. And the perspective is given by Lord Krishna. This is Bhagavad Gita 5:7. One who works in devotion, who is a pure soul, and who controls his mind and senses is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a man is never entangled. So I'm going to read the Sanskrit of that verse because it's very pertinent to this particular discussion related to the kings. Yoga yukto visuddhatma, vijitatma jitendriya, sarva bhutatma kurvam apina ipyate. So again, one who works in devotion, who's a pure soul, and who controls his mind and senses is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a man is never entangled. So the reason a person such as the king would be very dear to everyone is because he's working in Krishna consciousness. It means that he's viewing himself as serving everyone. He's viewing himself as a servant to all. In turn, because everyone is satisfied by his work, he is pure in consciousness himself. So the satisfaction of everybody else allows him to stay in that condition of purity. Because he's pure in consciousness, his mind is completely controlled. And because his mind is controlled, his senses are also controlled. And because his mind is always fixed on Krishna, there's no chance of his being deviated from Krishna. And a comment by Srila Prabhupada is interesting. He says that a man of controlled senses cannot be offensive to anyone. So just as a little adjunct. So this is the picture that emerges of how, looking at this question, how is it that this reality will come about, that the kings will be able to spread bhakti? So just hearing how intricate and powerful this process of practicing Krishna consciousness leads to this harmonious interplay between the kings acting in devotion, the satisfaction of the citizens, and that feeding back into the devotion of the kings such that they remain with their minds controlled, their senses controlled, and fully satisfied. The citizens are, and fully satisfied is the king. So a reason the person, the king, is very dear to everyone is, of course, because he's working in Krishna consciousness, in this being the servant of all. So it's the king's sacrifice to Lord Krishna which would teach the people their eternal occupational duty or dharma, or devotional service to Lord Krishna. So in this way, the kings would be protecting their subjects by instituting the principle of devotional service to Lord Krishna. So these results of the king's work would be their means of worshipping Lord Krishna. So the result of the king's work would be that they protect their subjects are actually learning to also take up devotional life. And that result, the fact that all these subjects would be taking up devotional life based on how the kings are performing their service to Lord Krishna through their sacrifices. This in turn, that result of the king's devotional service, their particular work, is that is their means of worshipping Lord Krishna. So there's a second order. So looking at that first order of Lord Krishna, there's a second order that Lord Krishna gives to the kings. And this is the order he gives, and these were his words. As you live your lives, begetting generations of progeny and encountering happiness and distress, birth and death, always keep your minds fixed on me. So that was the instruction, the second instruction of Lord Krishna. That was in text 22. So the order that the kings received was to spend their time, and this is interesting, they were to spend their time producing sons, tolerating happiness and distress, and encountering birth and death. So you can see the vision is a very long-spanning vision. It's not just looking at the current time lifespan, but many lifespans. They were to do the same kind of work, produce sons, tolerate happiness and distress, and encounter birth and death. So, and this phrasing was by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. This highlights Lord Krishna's instruction to the king. And this particular second instruction to the kings also reveals how remembrance of him, Lord Krishna, is fostered through their performing devotional service. So to understand how their devotional service is being fostered, again, we'll go back to Bhagavad Gita. There's this fantastic explanation by Lord Krishna in 5.10. So note, one who performs his duty without attachment, surrendering the results unto the Supreme Lord, is unaffected by sinful actions, as the lotus leaf is untouched by water. So there's that a particular point that the duty needs to be done without attachment. So just stepping back and looking at this, the material body and the senses are not the method through which the kings will be acting. So even though they've been instructed, produce sons, go through birth and death, tolerate happiness and distress, they're not actually, the method that they're using is not acting through the material body and the senses per se, but rather they're acting through the knowledge that the body is the property of Krishna and is in being engaged in the service of Krishna. So you can see it's a very subtle distinction. You know, one's working from a platform of understanding the whole way through. So that's how the kings are having to operate. It's not you just functioning on a physiological level, going through producing sons, tolerating happiness and distress, but rather it's having that knowledge that the actions are being performed for the purpose of satisfying Lord Krishna. So that's the method, using that particular knowledge that Krishna has given to them, that they need to use this understanding as through which they'll be acting. Sorry. Yes. Sorry, it's because there's also a motorized lawnmower. So Lord Krishna, in fact, is giving a very specific instruction to the kings for the usage of the body and the senses in service to him. So the kings are to produce progeny and they are to tolerate happiness and distress. So he's laying out that vision once again, but arming them with knowledge. And it's from that platform that they have to perform their actions with knowledge, understanding what's the factual reality. Uh, so the instruction, again, is in keeping with an instruction of a similar nature that Krishna gave to a different king, Arjuna. So again, we're going to reference Bhagavad Gita because it gives a lot of insight into these instructions, these two instructions that Krishna has given to these kings. And in Bhagavad Gita 2:14, the temporary nature of happiness and distress is highlighted, because that's part of knowledge, understanding, having the understanding of what you can expect. So particularly when one's performing one's duty, there has to be some knowledge of an understanding of the instrument you're using to perform your activities, with which you are performing your activities, and also what is the outcome in terms of anything that you're acquiring or losing as you're going through the motions of performing your activities. So this is what Krishna says: O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course of time are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O scion of Bharata, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. So that was Amatra Spashas tu Konteya, Sitoshni Sukha Dukada, Agapayaino Nitsa Tam Sitikshava Bharata. So Lord Krishna is once again painting the vision for what was lying ahead for the kings, what the kings will need to learn to tolerate. And they're going to have to learn to tolerate this non-permanent appearance and disappearance of happiness and distress in the discharge of their duties. And Srila Prabhupada explains it this way: to fight is the religious principle of the Kshatriya. And although one has to fight with some friend or relative, one should not deviate from his prescribed duties. So perceptually, it might be a source of unhappiness for a king to think, oh, I have to fight with my friend, or that other king is my friend. But there may be a necessity to do so. So the king cannot deviate from his duty. He has to perform his duty because his religious duty is to fight. So that's Srila Prabhupada's explanation. So he cannot deviate from his prescribed duty. And Srila Prabhupada expands on this, and this is from Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, where he explains something of what the kings have to deal with in performing their duties. So this is Srila Prabhupada writing as though Krishna's talking to them in a more elaborate way. As far as you are concerned, you all belong to Kshatriya families. Therefore, you should live honestly according to the prescribed duties befitting the royal order, and make your citizens happy in all respects. Keep to the standard of Kshatriya life. Do not beget children out of sense gratification, but simply take charge of the welfare of the people in general. Everyone in this material world takes birth in continuation of his previous life, and thus he is subject to the stringent laws of material nature, such as birth and death, distress and happiness, profit and loss. One should not be disturbed by duality, but be fixed in my devotional service, and thus remain balanced in mind and satisfied in all circumstances, considering all things to be given by me. So that's a very interesting breakdown, that the kings are receiving this vision for their future, They've been informed what they can expect. They've been informed what they will need to learn. And a lot of the learning has to do with dealing with their perceptual reality, because that's what anyone has to deal with. One may perceive something that comes one's way either as something that allows one to be happy or something that allows one to be distressed. But then one has to constantly go back to the position of knowledge and remember that actually I'm perceiving this I'm looking from a particular lens, and actually also this state, this present state, whether it's a happy state or a distressed state, is going to be temporary. It's going to pass. And actually, why this has even come to me is because it's been given by Lord Krishna. So that's what Lord Krishna is laying out for the kings. So he's truly equipping them for their role as kings, taking into account what they expressed that they wished to do, which was to be able to constantly remember the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Now, the reason one has to follow the prescribed duties or rules and regulations of religious principles is that it's allows one to rise to the platform of knowledge. That's why the emphasis that the kings cannot deviate from their prescribed duty, because the idea is that one is cultivating an elevation of consciousness, one's rising to the platform of knowledge, so that one's getting stronger and stronger in one's spiritual knowledge. And it's by such knowledge that one can be freed from the clutches of illusion or this perceptual reality. And Srila Prabhupada continues in this way. So this is as though Krishna's again addressing the kings. Thus one can live a very happy and peaceful life, even within the material condition. In other words, one should actually be callous to the material body and its byproducts, and should be unaffected by them. One should remain fully satisfied in the interests of the soul and engage in the service of the super soul. One should engage his mind in only thinking of me. One should simply become my devotee. One should simply worship me. And one should offer his respectful obeisances unto me alone. In this way, one can cross over the ocean of nations very easily and at the end come back to me. In conclusion, your lives should be engaged constantly in my service. So it's a very strong instruction the kings are receiving. And everything rests on this particular understanding that they have to be, as Srila Prabhupada put Krishna's words to the kings, callous to the material body and callous to the byproducts of the material body. So naturally is going to be sons, daughters, queens, etc. But there has to be the proper understanding. So the proper understanding is that every material body will come to this point of final destruction. And it's going through changes, and the end result is destruction. So therefore, the knowledgeable position is to function fixing one's mind on Lord Krishna and acting in service to him. So for the kings, it's simply serving all his subjects and not being extra attached to perhaps his more closer family members. So these kings, and this was the verse that we came to today, because they had to process this information, or should I say these instructions, of these two important instructions from Lord Krishna. Because one can actually say, I wish to be devoted to your lotus feet, and it may remain in the air, but Krishna actually hones in on it and says how it can be done, basically. So in the verse today, we're reading that these kings actually came to diligently carry out the orders that Krishna had imparted to them. So they were glorious kings. They, in fact, took the instructions to heart. And so there's this nice paragraph written by Srila Prabhupada in Krishna book that just highlights this particular, I guess, nature of the kings and where they've come to and how they actually process these instructions. So this is Srila Prabhupada's writing. By his liberal behavior, unparalleled in the history of the world, Lord Krishna released all the kings who had been in the clutches of Jarasandha, and the kings, being fully satisfied, began to chant his holy name, think of his holy form, and glorify his transcendental pastimes as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The kings began to manage the affairs of their kingdoms in accordance with the instructions of Lord Krishna. And all these kings and their subjects passed their lives very happily. So that was Srila Prabhupada. The final point is that the king and their subjects passed their lives and days very happily, because the kings actually took these two instructions of Lord Krishna completely to heart. So that was as much as I was able to expand on this particular verse. If there's some thoughts to add to the discussion.
It becomes naturally confusing when the explanation is, in Christian's instructions are there that one have to perform very carefully one's prescribed duties. And on the other hand, it's the instruction of one should be callous towards one's material, body and also relations. And in fact, Arjuna was very confused through a good chunk of the Bhagavad Gita, 1/3 of the Bhagavad Gita. He was very confused by these instructions because they appear in Arjuna's words was, these are conflicting instructions, these are contradictory, they're conflicting with each other. So the fact is that it's not a very easy thing to understand how you have to be carefully carry on the duties that are within, and these duties have to do with relationship with others. It's a duty towards others, and at the same time be detached and callous towards those very same relationships. So it's always quite something to understand the practical application, or how these conflicting instructions actually they don't conflict anymore. There are very clear guidelines and directions of how one can live one life in a progressive way towards that ideal position of complete detachment from the material world. So the Bhagavad Gita as a whole takes us through that whole, progression like that. So it's an important thing to understand. I think, in one sense, the question is there, and within I'm adding, the importance of understanding the message of the Bhagavad Gita, which deals with that very graphically, with that same type of sort of conundrum, to resolve.
Yes. And that, like on a material level, when one hears the term be callous to the material body, be callous to other material bodies. It sounds as though there's a kind of disregard or a hardness of the heart that would have to be there. But taken into account that the actual position that one needs to hold on to internally is constantly having this understanding that there's a beginning and an end to anything material. So you could say that if one thinks, oh, there's a beginning and there's an end, there's a certain perhaps sadness, unhappiness at the thought that, something that one holds as dear, I mean, one values residing in one's own body because it's an instrument through which you can act. One values other persons, their appearance, their particular personalities that are residing in a particular body. So to actually be walking around with the knowledge that actually that body, this body, it's going to go through its changes. We've already gone through a good amount of changes, the growth, the development. Some persons have had their progeny, some persons not. But then, there's a decline of the physical form, and then there's destruction of the physical form. But if one is carrying that knowledge, it's actually a source of strength. And why it's a source of strength is that it helps one to stay centered, that the focus needs to be on the eternal, that's constantly present. So whichever lifetime one's going through, holding on to the lotus feet of Lord Krishna is an eternal. So that, so in fact, having the knowledge is a source of strength. And the perceptual reality that, there's some sadness knowing that, oh, actually, this body, those bodies that are dear to me are actually going to come to a point of not being there. It could be that there's that perception, oh, that's a source of sadness, but constantly remembering, no, actually, it's a source of strength, because then everything one does has more meaning. I remember when I was quite young, there was a dog in the house that I was living in, and the dog was going to be leaving its body. And I remember being very surprised because I noticed this dog, I was quite young. I remember this dog suddenly started to sniff frantically at everything around, started pawing the ground like, it was really feeling the ground. So I guess it understood it was going to be leaving. So suddenly everything became important. The senses became doubly important. It had to smell everything. It had to touch the ground more deliberately. And, soon after the creature left its body. So it's that kind of thing. It becomes more pertinent, one's activities in the world. One is more conscious of everything one is doing and more conscious of the fact for whom it's being done, so that it actually stays on that higher platform of knowledge. So it's a constant cultivation and remembrance, but it serves to actually enhance one's devotional service. That's the way I'm understanding it. Yeah.
Thank you for your class, Mataji. Um, when it comes to these different um, things, what would you say is the importance of confidentiality? Because for the kings to decide to have progeny, not have progeny, um, for devotees to decide to do different things. I was wondering if you could maybe touch on a little bit of confidentiality, because um, we're speaking about kings, and now we're in Kali Yuga as aspiring devotees, and it's a lot of things, um, a lot of variables, a lot of things to consider. But when it comes to all these things, my thought is it should be between guru and the person. But I was wondering if you could touch on anything about confidentiality.
I guess you're asking the question when it comes to making decisions that affect one's expansion of one's family life or anything. Okay, because you brought up having children, because that was one of the instructions of Lord Krishna to the king to, keep on having sons. Uh, so your question is also touching on who one should consult or who should be privy to one's internal mullings of which particular direction to take in one's life. So naturally, the person who is the strongest in their devotional life will be able to be the most objective, because it means that person doesn't have attachment or isn't prey to the way they prefer things or perceive things on a material level. It will be more in service to Lord Krishna, what is the right thing to do. So that objectivity naturally is most present in the highest social order, which is the sannyasa order, the renunciate. So that person in that order can see extremely objectively. And so that is an excellent person with which to share one's mullings according to the direction one is considering, not considering to go on a particular issue, I would say. Because the other orders, like the next order down, the Kshatriya, the administrator, you can see that there's Krishna has to spell it out to the kings, not actually choosing to have sons because of sense gratification. So he has to spell it out, the dangers. So it means that the Kshatriyas have to still go through that process of elevating the consciousness to come to that position of complete attachment to Lord Krishna and no attachment on the material side. So certainly it would be somebody in the renounced order that would be the best confidant to consult, because they are on that highest level of spiritual knowledge, that platform of knowledge. So that's where the decision making and the understanding is being done. It's being done on that level, not getting mixed with something on a lower level. Yeah. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai.